My credit card got declined buying bananas and oatmeal. Of all the humiliations in a long marriage, I didn't expect mine to start with a beep and a cashier's practice smile. The card reader flashed red like it was judging me. "Do you have another one?" the clerk asked. Her tone was kind, rehearsed. She probably saw this a dozen times a day. I forced a chuckle and dug out a backup card while murmuring something about banks being too paranoid. She laughed like she believed me. I knew she didn't. I left the store with a plastic bag swinging like an accusation and $1,000 silence parked in my gut. It wasn't that I didn't have money. At least, I should have had money. My salary cleared 2 days ago. We'd never missed a payment. But lately, I'd stopped watching the numbers as closely as I used to. I let her handle the household budgeting. Julia liked control, and I liked letting her feel in charge where it didn't matter. Except maybe it did matter. Maybe it always had. That night she handed me a $30 bill. We were in the kitchen. The smell of sautéed mushrooms and thyme hung in the air. She knew it was my favorite. Candle burning, music low, some indie jazz playlist she always put on when she was in hosting mode. She smiled like a woman on top of her world. "Here," she said, unfolding the crisp bill between 2 fingers like it was a gift certificate to dignity. "For groceries. Or gas. Or just to help you stay on course." My eyes lingered on the cash. $30. 3 faded green bills and the suggestion that maybe I'd lost control and just hadn't noticed. "Thanks," I said. I took it. I smiled. I said all the things a man says when he doesn't want to cause a ripple, when he's still trying to believe everything is okay. She leaned up, kissed my cheek, and went back to stirring the risotto like she hadn't just handed me my own allowance. I stood there with the bill in my hand, feeling the shape of a new silence form between us. Not the usual kind. This one had edges. She'd started doing that more often, making helpful suggestions wrapped in velvet, tracking spending, labeling envelopes, talking about future independence, as if it were an aesthetic goal. I thought it was a phase, some post-pandemic obsession with control. Budgeting was the new yoga. But something about today stuck. The precision of the cash amount. The way she'd slipped it in without a trace of tension, like she'd practiced. And more than anything, the smirk she tried to swallow. The one that said, "This isn't about help. This is about power." We ate dinner together. She laughed at something I said about my coworker's failed attempt at baking bread. She kissed me again after dessert. Her phone buzzed, face down as always, and she didn't flinch. I did. I thought back to the moment 2 months ago when I asked if she wanted to rework our joint budget together, and she said, "Why? So you can feel in control again?" It stung then. Now it echoed. We used to be a team. We built spreadsheets together when we were broke and newly married. We made fun of couples who kept secrets and passwords and his and hers, everything. We swore we'd never become them. But lately, the finances were hers. The account alerts were gone. The logins changed. Our calendar had become a mess of vague blocks labeled client meeting mentoring or freelance check-in. I went to bed that night with her wrapped around me, soft and warm like a memory I was afraid to touch. Her hair still smelled like lavender. Her breathing slowed within minutes. And me, I stared at the ceiling, gripping the edge of a $30 lesson. I didn't argue with her. I didn't ask where the money went. I didn't accuse her of anything. But I stopped assuming she was on my side. There's something ugly about realizing you're being handled, that your stability has become someone else's foundation for exit. It starts small, declined cards and patronizing gestures, but beneath it, there's movement, a quiet shifting of ground. I'd always trusted that if something was wrong, she'd tell me. Now, I wasn't so sure. She'd given me $30 and called it fairness. I decided I'd find out what it was really buying. The next morning, I called the bank, not with accusation. Just curiosity. I kept my tone flat, professional, said I noticed a declined transaction, wanted to review recent activity. The representative, chipper and unconcerned, read off a few pending charges I didn't recognize: boutique cafes nowhere near my office, multiple rideshares during work hours, an invoice from a place called MKT App Services, all tied to our joint checking account. I thanked her, hung up, and opened a spreadsheet. If I was being accounted for, I decided I'd start doing some accounting myself. I set up balance alerts. Every deposit, every withdrawal, pinged to a new email she didn't know existed. I went back through 3 months of online statements and started highlighting anomalies. Small ones, at first. Then a pattern began to take shape. Thursday lunches at the same spot downtown. A lift from that location to another unfamiliar address. Regular deposits labeled, consulting income, small, consistent. Not unusual for her, given her freelance work. But the names on the memos were new. One stood out. Dev Biz Dev MTG. Dev. Not David. Not Devin. Just Dev. Friendly. Familiar. I asked her about it, carefully, one evening over dinner when she mentioned something about helping a friend find an apartment. Oh, she said, brushing it off. Dev's just a guy from one of my mentoring groups. He's trying to launch a nonprofit, wants advice. We're doing some biz dev brainstorming. Biz dev. She loved that phrase lately. Made her feel like a startup executive instead of someone still owing 3 freelance invoices from last quarter. You mentioned helping someone find a place, Dev? I asked, feigning casual curiosity. She nodded. Yeah, just browsing listings for him. He's coming into some funding soon. Wants to get set up before the summer. She looked me dead in the eye as she said it. Her face soft, her voice light, the words clear. And yet something inside me recoiled, like watching a magician pull a rabbit out of a hat after you've already seen it stuffed in their sleeve. I said nothing, just nodded, sipped my wine. That night, I installed a GPS tracker on her car. Not because I didn't trust her, but because she made trusting her feel optional. The next few weeks passed in a rhythm of forced normalcy. She'd leave the house in outfits that had shifted slowly from casual to calculated, structured blouses, subtle heels, too much perfume for co-working cafes. I've got that mentorship group tonight, she'd say on Fridays. Might run late. Of course, I'd reply. Do your thing. And every Friday night, her car parked outside a loft in the downtown arts district. Same address, same window with lights that never went off before midnight. I looked up the listing. Furnished rental. Leased own. Understated modern style. Exactly her taste. Meanwhile, at home, she still curled up beside me like nothing had changed. Still touched my arm when we watched our favorite shows. Still laughed at my dry one-liners. And I smiled back, played my part, while my laptop ran data pulls behind her back. I started tracking the money more aggressively. Exported CSV files. Ran name lookups. Traced payments routed through peer-to-peer apps I'd never seen on her phone before. She'd begun masking it all, but not well enough. She wasn't hiding an affair. She was budgeting for independence, and not the kind you whisper about during midlife uncertainty. The kind you document, fund, and file, months in advance. She was planning something, and I wasn't going to confront her yet, because every line item she logged gave me another one to hold over her later. Friday at 6:17 p.m. Her car pulled out of our driveway like it always did. Right on cue. She waved through the window, makeup subtle but polished, that denim jacket she only wore when she wanted to look casual without being forgettable. Mentoring group, she said again that afternoon, when I asked how late she'd be. Probably 10. Might grab a drink after. She kissed me. Just a brush on the cheek, light and practiced. The kind you give a man you think still believes you. I watched her taillights disappear. Then I opened my laptop. The GPS showed her cruising down the 395, like usual. Past the co-working space. Past the non-profit center she sometimes name-dropped. Straight to the loft in the arts district. She parked at 6:42 p.m. I didn't call. I didn't text. I just watched the dot stay there. At 7:05, I put steaks on the grill. At 8:20, I poured 2 glasses of wine. Set one beside her seat on the couch. Let it sit there untouched. At 9:47, I started our favorite show. Let the intro music fill the silence. Laughed at a joke we both liked. At 10:11, her dot moved. By 10:45, she was home. Purse swinging. Smiling. Traffic was awful, she said, kicking off her shoes. But mentoring went great. One of the girls finally launched her Etsy store. She curled up next to me. Her hand found mine. Her head rested on my shoulder like nothing had changed. It smells amazing in here, she murmured, noticing the last of the steak aroma lingering in the air. You didn't have dinner? I waited, I said casually, as if it hadn't cost me anything. She winced, almost imperceptibly. I told you I might be late. No big deal, I said, kissing her temple. You're home now. She smiled, relieved. She thought she'd dodged suspicion again. And while she scrolled through her phone, thumb gliding effortlessly over messages I'd never see, I was downloading her bank records onto a hidden drive in the background. I cross-checked the ride receipts with GPS logs, noticed discrepancies in the timestamps. A few rides marked client sessions were happening within blocks of that same loft. More interesting, though, were the deposits. There was a steady stream of small transfers, consulting fees, freelance gigs, but two stood out. One from a checking account labeled D&J Strategy, another from an app-based business banking service I didn't recognize. When I traced the D&J account, I found a registration document. 2 co-owners, Julia Reynolds, Devon Hale. There it was again, Dev. He wasn't just a mentee or a friend she was helping. He was a partner. And not just emotionally, if that part was even happening yet. This was financial. They'd registered a consultancy months ago. Low visibility, no website. Just enough structure to justify bank routing numbers and grant submissions. Her money. His name. My silence. That week, she made me French toast on Saturday morning. We ate it on the porch like we always used to. She sat across from me, hair in a loose bun, barefoot and radiant in the golden light. And I looked at her, still laughing at some podcast anecdote she half retold, and I realized something new. This wasn't about cheating. This was about a woman rehearsing her exit, one perfectly budgeted lie at a time. And me? I was going to make sure the receipt was printed, itemized, and impossible to refund. The final thread unraveled on a quiet Wednesday night, long after she went to bed with a sigh and a kiss on my shoulder. I stayed up, the way I had been lately, in front of the glow of my monitor, combing through bank statements like they were crime scenes. I found it tucked into a stack of e-signed documents stored in her cloud drive, poorly hidden, as if she thought I'd never look. Maybe she assumed I wouldn't know how. Or maybe she wanted to be caught, just slowly enough to stay ahead of the consequences. A lease agreement. Solo occupancy. Effective date, 2 weeks from now. Unit, downtown loft, 3rd floor. The same address she parked outside every Friday night. The tenant listed? Julia Reynolds. But what stopped me, what made my jaw tighten and my fingers pause, was the application's supporting section. Monthly income, listed in part from her freelance work. But the other half? Supplemented by spouse's stable income, Mark Reynolds. She used me to qualify. She'd leveraged my paycheck, my credit, my name, to build her own runway. And then there was the joint savings account I didn't recognize, tucked under a different bank, one we never used. The ownership showed 2 names, Julia Reynolds and Devon Hale. So not only was she building a future with him, she was funding it with me. That's when the floor fell out. I didn't react, not in the way you'd expect. No slamming drawers or pacing the room. Just stillness. A cold, pure quiet that I hadn't felt in years. Like the part of me that loved her had stepped out of the room and closed the door behind it. I reread the line. Stability provided by spousal employment. She hadn't just betrayed me. She'd budgeted my existence into her freedom plan. The next morning, I started building my exit strategy. I contacted a friend, quietly, carefully, who specialized in high-net separations. Not a big-name divorce lawyer. Someone discreet, tactical. Someone who understood that the first strike wasn't about rage. It was about leverage. Over the next week, I compiled everything. Screenshots, statements, application copies, GPS logs, deposit histories. I built a folder. Clean, labeled, devastating. I initiated a timed lockdown on our joint accounts. The mechanism was already in place. Automatic if suspicious activity or unplanned withdrawals occurred. I hadn't used it in years. But now, it waited for a single keystroke. I filed divorce papers, unsigned but prepared. Dated, logged, and ready for delivery. I rerouted direct deposit to a private account she didn't know existed. And I waited. Friday came again. She left at 6:15, smiled through the window, wore that same casual denim armor. I might be late, she said. I know, I replied, kissing her like always, letting her walk away from a house she didn't know was already halfway emptied of her power. At 8:03 p.m., I activated the account freeze. At 8:09, I placed the folder on the dining table. By 10:42, the lock turned in the front door. She walked in holding takeout, smiling, still humming something low under her breath. Then she saw it, the folder, perfectly centered. Her name on the tab. Nothing dramatic, just waiting. What's this? She asked, not moving. Accountability, I said. She didn't touch it, not right away. She just looked at me, then back at the table. Her voice faltered a bit. Mark, I didn't answer. I flipped the folder open, showed her the lease. her application, her budget, with my name under support. Then I flipped to the quote I printed from one of her private group messages, one she never thought I'd see. Freedom is being able to leave when I want. I closed the folder. Good, I said. Now you'll get to find out what it costs. She didn't cry. Not at first. She just stood there with the folder still open, one hand gripping the edge of the table like it might steady her. You've been spying on me? She asked, voice brittle but trying to sound indignant. I didn't respond. I just watched her face, the way her pupils dilated, the way her jaw clenched as she tried to figure out which version of herself to become. The calm strategist? The misunderstood wife? The one who was just exploring options. I gave her nothing to latch onto. What do you want from me? She finally asked, quieter now. This isn't about what I want, I said. It's about what you've already taken. She reached for the folder again, slower this time, flipping through it with trembling fingers. Her eyes scanned the pages: lease agreement, bank statements, screenshots of payment transfers, GPS logs. Her hand paused over the deposit into the D&J strategy account. She looked up. You've misunderstood this. Dev is just. No. I cut in, my voice calm but firm. Don't lie. You're smarter than that. So am I. Silence. Then the sound of a credit card hitting the floor. She'd pulled hers out, tried to use it. I watched as the decline alert pinged my phone before she could even process what happened. She stared at the screen. That's impossible. No. It's intentional. She looked at me like she didn't recognize the man sitting across from her anymore. But she did. She just hadn't expected this version to show up, quiet, prepared, 10 steps ahead. You froze everything? She asked, still testing the boundaries. I reallocated assets under temporary injunction pending divorce proceedings, I replied. A sharp breath. You already filed? Pre-signed. Submitted today at 5 p.m. She dropped into the chair across from me. Shoulders slumped, mouth slightly open. The takeout bag still dangled from her hand. It hit the floor without ceremony. I watched her face shift, anger, panic, disbelief, guilt. Then, finally, something like resignation. I didn't mean for it to get this far, she said, almost a whisper. Yes, you did, I replied. You just didn't mean to get caught. She covered her face with her hands. I let the silence stretch. I thought back to all the Friday nights I'd sat alone, pretending not to notice. All the casual lies she'd fed me with the same grace she used to feed compliments. All the budget sheets and friendly suggestions that were really just control mechanisms disguised as support. She had built an escape plan with my name on the paperwork. Now she'd get to find out how escape felt when the floor collapsed under it. I'll contest it, she said suddenly, voice sharp. You can't just cut me off. You can try, I said. But everything you've done, every dollar you rerouted, every lie you budgeted, I documented it. This isn't personal anymore. It's arithmetic. She stared at me like she wanted to scream. But she didn't, because she knew the numbers didn't lie. And this time, she'd budgeted for freedom but forgotten to account for the fallout. The divorce filing hit her like a wave she thought she could outrun. She contested it, just like she said she would. Claimed emotional pressure, financial coercion, pattern of control. Her attorney was slick, young, loud, camera-ready. I stayed silent. Let the documents speak. It didn't take long for the judge to see through it. I had dates, transfers, emails, a line-by-line reconstruction of every financial decision she made while smiling across our dinner table. Every Friday night, mentoring session, backed by GPS and time-stamped receipts. The lease, the bank account, the partnership with Dev, and most of all, the pattern. Not an affair, not just deceit. A methodical extraction of stability. That changed the game. The court issued a temporary freeze on all assets, joint and independent. Julia tried to object. Cried on the second day of hearing. But her tears were thin, performative. The kind that dried too quickly. Her attorney pivoted. Said she'd been misled by Dev. Said she was reclaiming independence, not defrauding anyone. Claimed the consulting LLC had never made real income, that it was all exploratory. I submitted the tax forms she filed using our marital address, the ones listing Dev as co-director. That was the last time her lawyer tried that angle. The judge ruled swiftly: marital misconduct, intentional obfuscation. She lost claim to the joint savings. Spousal support was waived. But the money was the least of it. Caleb, her longtime friend, the one who vouched for her every mentoring event, lost his board seat when the truth came out. He'd been her character witness. Publicly. Loudly. He texted me once after the hearing. I didn't know, man. I really didn't. I didn't respond. He didn't text again. Her social circle fractured. Not because of what she did, but because of how calculated it was. People can forgive passion. They struggle with premeditation. At work, she tried to spin it. Just going through something. Taking space. Refocusing. But too many people had seen the court filings. Too many had seen the folder. The one I left in the kitchen during mediation. I didn't leak it. I didn't have to. She'd spent years building an image. Independent. Empowered. Grounded. Now she was a woman who forged an exit and tripped over the rug she pulled from under someone else. Meanwhile, I kept quiet. Showed up. Did my job. Filed reports. Took late meetings so I wouldn't have to sit in the quiet of the house she no longer lived in. The freedom she had longed for became a line item in court documents. Intentional dissociation from joint responsibility. She moved into the loft, but not with Dev. Not anymore. He stopped showing up to hearings, subpoenaed once, never returned. By the third month, she stopped trying to reach me. Except once. She emailed. No subject line. Just 2 sentences. I thought it would be cleaner. I never thought you'd dismantle me this quietly. I didn't reply. Because by then, dismantling her wasn't the point. I was just rebuilding what she tried to spend. The final twist didn't come during the hearings, or even in the fallout afterward. It came in April, while I was sitting across from my CPA in a downtown office with coffee gone cold between us. He furrowed his brow and slid a paper across the desk. You aware of this 1099? He asked. I looked down. A tax form I didn't recognize, issued from a state-funded community arts council. It showed a payout of $9,800 to Mark Reynolds Consulting, LLC, a business I'd shut down 3 years ago. I blinked. That's not mine, I said. Not this year. I haven't touched that EIN since I dissolved the structure. He rotated the paper. Well, someone did. It's your federal ID, your name, your signature digitally filed. I stared at the document. The grant was filed under a program for youth economic empowerment. Attached narrative. Facilitating development of entrepreneurial pathways for underserved creatives. The banking destination? A consulting LLC I hadn't seen before, co-owned by Julia Reynolds and Devin Hale. The room tilted slightly. I didn't say anything for a while. Just sat there, heart slowing down instead of speeding up. That was the part that scared me. I wasn't shocked. Not really. Just cold. Measured. Like I'd been bracing for one more betrayal without knowing what form it would take. She used my name, I finally said. Filed the application with my identity. Redirected the funds. He nodded grimly. And she claimed it as nonprofit contract income. That's state-level fraud. I spent the next 2 days collecting everything. Tax documents, grant descriptions, digital signatures, business registrations, disbursement ledgers. Then I filed a report with the state's Department of Economic Integrity. An audit was triggered. Julia was contacted within the week. The grant board suspended funding to the entire program pending investigation. Her shared LLC, D&J Strategy, was formally dissolved by state order. Dev was subpoenaed. The affair wasn't just emotional or financial. She committed fraud using my name. She'd used my credibility, the very stability she pretended to resent, to fuel her freedom plan. She'd sold it as empowerment, but it was theft.